Hi, this video is just a technical and marketing perspective on sensors and biosensors. And I also have a sort of subtitle to this, which is Crossing Two Chasms to Get to the Sensor Market. So when I'm talking about two chasms, I'll sort of try and define the two chasms that I'm thinking about. The first chasm I'm thinking about, because of our perspective at Zimmer and Peacock, we do a lot of academic collaborations. So we're used to kind of academic research, and on the other side of, let's say, the chasm, the commercialization. So there's good funding for there is funding for academic research, and businesses like ZP probably have the commercial strength to commercialize certain types of technology. But there's a chasm in between them, which is the paper from the university or the patent finishes kind of here, and then the company has to pick it up and run with it. And across that chasm for me is the minimally viable product. What's the first thing that we can do in order to go from the research to the commercialization? There's not necessarily, yes, there is potentially funding for that from government sources. But the first chasm, when I'm talking about two chasms in this, is this chasm between research and initial commercialization. Now, the second chasm is really defined by a book by a guy called Geoffrey Moore. It's fairly famous within business schools and within marketing circles. And once upon a time, the product life cycle would be kind of a curve, which is kind of quite uninterrupted. That you would have kind of expected sales, and the sales would peak, and then the sales would start to diminish with time. Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm book, he actually says, you'll get the initial sales, and then you're going to enter a chasm period before you really can get to the early majority and late majority. So when people kind of are saying, these are the big sales we're expecting, they're really talking about this sort of early and late majorities. But in order to get to those early and late majorities, you obviously have to go through your innovators and your early adopters, and then you actually will enter into a chasm, potentially a sales chasm. And so this presentation or this talk is a bit about that chasm. So I said there were two chasms. The first chasm actually, is more relevant to companies like Zimmer and Peacock, where we do adopt a lot of technology from universities, and so we're quite used to this. So we have some good collaborations with Tony Miller at the John Innes Centre, and also with Oxford University around some of their food quality sensors. Garlic, ginger, and chili, for example. So we will talk about measuring the hotness of chili as one of our case studies, and we're not going to talk about measuring the nitrate in soil, because of the two technologies, the chili sensing is further along. But if you Google nitrate sensing in Zimmer and Peacock, you'll soon see that we're also quite active on this. And measuring NPK, nitrate, phosphate, and potassium is important for basically for human beings, because obviously we want to feed more people on the same amount of land, and we also don't want to over fertilize that land, because it will just lead to a waste of resource and then environmental damage as well. Now, our interest in chili sensing, for example, came about because there was such a massive amount of media interest in this chili sensor from Oxford University several years ago, and that kind of tweaked our interest at ZP. And that has led to this point, something called FoodSense. FoodSense, there's an app that exists out there on the App Store. There's a meter that you can buy. You can find that on a website called FoodSense Technology, and you'll also see several videos about us using this. And what FoodSense is, it has a food safety panel, and a food quality panel. It also has a food safety panel. I'm really just touching on the food quality panel today. What it's doing is it's taking subjective tests in the food industry. And these subjective tests are sort of sometimes called organoleptic tests. They're basically taste tests. So it's taking those subjective tests and turning them into something that's much more objective. For example, if you are a manufacturer of a chili product, and the way that you're doing product releases by tasting it and saying, yeah, that's good, it's not really going to fly with the large supermarkets, etc. So it is trying to quantify what's at the moment quite a qualitative test. And there's competition for this kind of test. The competition is analytical, HPLC. It's a £50,000 or dollar instrument, so not really that much competition. Panel testing, where you use employees to kind of give you an opinion, or you try and do it in a statistical manner so that the results are more objective. Guessing, which is really what's going on an awful lot, and then there's this objective measurement, which food sense is. So crossing the first chasm, so I say there's a first chasm between academia and industry, which really requires an MVP, and then the second chasm is if we've put together the MVP, the minimally viable product, then we need to get that onto the market. So ZP, we do have the food sense, and it is a good platform for actually from taking academic research and getting it onto the market. And the reason it's a good platform is it has this ability to be able to adopt or adapt to new assays quite quickly. So I would ask you to kind of go onto the App Store, download Food Sense, and you'll find that there's actually quite a lot of tests available. And that will give you a sense of the adaptability of this technology. So for example, if somebody has a scientific paper and it fulfills a few criteria, one of them, is it electrochemical? Is it using disposable sensors? Is it using electrochemical methodology? Then we can probably translate it quite nicely onto Food Sense. And we can translate that lab work into a MVP and probably start putting a dedicated website up around that particular product. So let's say we did get through the MVP stage, we got something onto the market. Now, we have to accept that we have some early adopters and we have some innovators, and they're really a small, let's say, minority of the actual market. And so only you have your early innovators and your innovators and your early adopters. And now what's happening is, and this is true in the case of ZP, we are an innovative company, so we're quite used to this scenario where you will sell initially and you will get those sales, and you will also have a lot of conversations, but a lot of the conversations with the early majority. And I can illustrate this. For example, there's something called the American Spice Trade Association, ASTA, and we have gone to ASTA possibly more than two, and maybe even 3 occasions. And the initial conversations we had on our first visit to that, it's an annual conference. The initial conversations we had in our first year are now leading to sales, and we're probably in our 3rd year on this product. And that's very interesting to me. See that you will meet these people, they will be very interested, very enthusiastic, but they're waiting to find out what the innovators and the early adopters are actually saying. So we have now Geoffrey Moore. I should be very clear. Geoffrey Moore is the guy who's kind of conceived of the idea that it's not just a smooth upward trend, that actually you could hit some chasms, and anything that's innovative and maybe changes the workflow that people already have, you have to be able to deal with this initial sluggishness, maybe even a chasm in sales, and then be ready to kind of cross that chasm and deal with the early majority. So in our own experience, these chasms could be 2 years. At ZP, we're kind of fortunate that we know it's there. We are a revenue company, we are profitable, so we can deal with that. There's often a problem that actually that chasm, governments can't help you in that chasm, because if they did, you're already on the market. So if they're giving you money, it would be called state aid. And I don't think it's a healthy situation to have state aid in order to keep businesses alive anyway. And it's also, many international trading agreements mean you can't give state aid. So you have to be able to survive in that chasm, and at ZP we're quite good at surviving in that chasm. Now, dealing with the innovators and early adopters, what you're really doing is you're actually learning about the early majority, and you are figuring out the marketing mix and the product mix in order to actually access that early majority and that late majority. And that can be features and benefits. It can just be about lowering the price. It's hard to go into the market with a low price, but the early adopters and innovators might be less price sensitive than the early majority. So you can kind of have a certain price at one phase, but expect to lower the price in another phase so that you can actually be adopted by the larger population. And I suppose, in kind of summary, at ZP, we do understand that really getting innovation all the way from academia to the early majority, there are definitely two chasms. The first chasm, most people fail to cross it totally, which is how to get out of the academic situation and into a commercializing product. And then when you do get that commercializing product, many companies fall foul of. They will get their initial sales, and then they'll hit a chasm of sales, and they basically, if they don't have a source of revenue other than selling that product, they'll go out of business before they can actually reach the early majority. So I hope that was interesting. If you have any questions, I'll put a contact us link down below. And if you have a business idea or a technology and it involves electrochemical biosensing or electrochemical sensing, then I think we'd be delighted to chat to you at ZP. Okay, and thanks very much. Bye-bye.